The U.S. Mexico border today is one of the most discussed borders in the world. But how did the line in the sand come to be, and what historical events shaped it into what we see today? The story of the U.S. Mexico border begins long before either country existed. In the 1500s, Spain colonized much of what is now Mexico in the American Southwest. For centuries, the Spanish controlled vast stretches of land including Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. But Spain's grip on its American colonies weakened. By 1821, Mexico gained its independence, inheriting a massive chunk of North America. At this time, there was no U.S. Mexico border, just open land and vast frontiers. One of the first major turning points in the border's history came in 1836 when Texas declared its independence from Mexico. After a brutal struggle, Texas became its own republic. In 1845, it was annexed by the United States. This annexation didn't sit well with Mexico, leading to a full-blown conflict. In 1846, the Mexican-American War broke out. It was short but decisive. By 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo changed everything. This treaty ended the war and handed over a huge amount of Mexican territory to the United States, an area that would later become California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of several other states. But the most important part for the story? It sets the Rio Grande as the border between Texas and Mexico, marking the beginning of the modern U.S.-Mexican border. This treaty shifted nearly half of Mexico's lands into American hands, cementing the border between the two countries. But the story wasn't over yet. Just a few years later, the border changed again. In 1854, the U.S. purchased a small strip of land from Mexico in what's now southern Arizona and New Mexico, known as the Gadsden Purchase. This deal was made to secure a better route for a transcontinental railroad. This finalized the continental borders between the U.S. and Mexico, creating the boundary we still recognize today. As the U.S. and Mexico entered the 20th century, the border became more than just a line on a map. Growing populations on both sides led to an increase in trade, migration, and disputes. In 1924, the U.S. established the Border Patrol to regulate crossings, marking the beginning of more formal control over the border. The border fence and later more extensive walls started appearing in the decades to come, especially in areas with higher migration. Despite the controversies, the U.S.-Mexico border remains one of the busiest in the world, with millions of people and goods crossing it every year. But its complex history reminds us that borders are not just physical barriers, they're the product of centuries of history. From the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo to the Gadsden Purchase, this border was shaped by wars, treaties, and economic interest. Today, it represents long, intertwined history of two nations, neighbors with a complicated past and a shared future. Thanks for joining me on this journey through a history of the U.S.-Mexico border. If you want to learn more about the borders that shape our world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more episodes of Borderline History.